Jake groaned as the blinding light from the space station's artificial sun streamed through the cracks in his blinds. His head pounded like a jackhammer, and his mouth tasted like he'd been licking the inside of a spaceship engine. Last night's drinks with Glorb had been a mistake, a big one. He squinted at the ceiling, trying to piece together the hazy memories of karaoke, alien liquor, and Glorb's slimy attempts at dancing. As he rolled over, his heart nearly stopped. Sitting at the foot of his bed was a girl. No, not just a girl, an alien girl. Her skin shimmered like liquid sapphire, and her eyes glowed faintly, like twin moons in the dark. She was staring at him with an intensity that made him feel like a bug under a microscope. Jake blinked, wondering if he was still drunk. Hi, he croaked, his voice cracking like a teenager's. The alien girl tilted her head, her expression unreadable. You are awake, she said, her voice smooth and melodic but devoid of emotion. I have been observing you. Jake sat up slowly, clutching his blanket like a shield. Observing me? Like from a distance? Or are we talking full-on creepy staring? I have been watching you for 47 rotations of this station, she replied matter-of-factly. Your behavior is fascinating. Jake's brain short-circuited. Fascinating? Me? Lady, you must have been watching the wrong guy. I'm just a mechanic who spends most of his time fixing toilets and arguing with vending machines. She leaned forward slightly, her glowing eyes narrowing. You are incorrect. Your actions are illogical, unpredictable, and often self-destructive. Yet you persist. This is intriguing. Jake raised an eyebrow. So what, you're like an alien anthropologist or something? Here to study the weird habits of humans? I am Zyra, she said, ignoring his question. And I require your assistance. Jake's mind immediately went to the worst, or best, possible conclusion. He flashed her a lopsided grin. Assistance, huh? Well, I am pretty handy. What do you need? A leaky pipe fixed? A spaceship tuned up? Or maybe something a little more personal? Zyra didn't react to his suggestive tone. Your species possesses a unique ability to think irrationally. This is what I require. Jake blinked. Wait, you need me because I'm irrational? That's a first. Usually, people tell me to stop being irrational. Your illogical behavior is precisely what my people lack, Zyra said, standing up gracefully. Come. There is no time to waste. Jake hesitated, glancing down at his rumpled pajamas. Can I at least put on pants first? Or is this a come-as-you-are kind of situation? Zyra stared at him blankly. Clothing is irrelevant. Your cognitive functions are the priority. Jake sighed, grabbing a pair of jeans off the floor. All right. But just so you know, I charge extra for house calls. As they left his apartment, Jake couldn't help but notice how Zyra moved, like she was gliding rather than walking. He tried to keep up, but his hangover made every step feel like a marathon. So, Zyra, he said, puffing slightly, what's this big problem you need me to solve? Alien invasion? Broken warp drive? Or is it something more intimate? Zyra didn't look back. Our AI systems have malfunctioned. They have become too logical, too rigid. We require your creativity. Jake smirked. Creativity, huh? Well, I've been called a lot of things, but creative isn't usually one of them. Unless you count the time I rigged a toaster to play the harmonica. Zyra stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Your ability to think outside established parameters is precisely what we need. Will you assist us? Jake scratched the back of his neck, trying to look nonchalant. Well, I guess I could spare a few hours. But just so we're clear, this isn't some weird alien prank, right? Glorb didn't put you up to this? I do not understand the concept of a prank, Zyra said, her tone as serious as ever. This is a matter of utmost importance. Jake shrugged. All right, lead the way. But if this ends with me getting probed, I'm sending you the bill. Zyra didn't respond, simply turning and continuing down the corridor. Jake followed, his mind racing with possibilities. An alien girl needed his help? This was either the start of the best day of his life or the worst. Either way, he was in for one hell of a ride. As they approached a sleek, futuristic ship docked at the station, Jake couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. Sure, he was hungover, underdressed, and completely out of his depth, but hey, when else was he going to get a chance to save the day with his irrational thinking? Zyra paused at the ship's entrance, turning to him one last time. Prepare yourself, Jake. What you are about to witness may challenge your understanding of reality. Jake grinned, shoving his hands in his pockets. Lady, my understanding of reality was challenged the moment I woke up to you staring at me. Bring it on. Zyra nodded, and the ship's doors slid open with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. Or at least, he hoped he was. Jake stepped into Zyra's ship, his jaw dropping at the sight of the sleek, high-tech interior. The walls shimmered with a faint, pulsating light, and the air smelled faintly of ozone. It was like walking into the future, if the future was designed by someone with a serious obsession with neon. Zyra led him to a central console, where a holographic interface flickered to life. The AI's voice, cold and mechanical, filled the room. Welcome, human. Your presence is unexpected. Jake raised an eyebrow. Thanks? I think. So, what's the deal with this AI of yours? It got a name, or do I just call it HAL? It is designated as Unit X427, Zyra said, her tone as emotionless as ever. It has become too logical, too rigid. It cannot adapt to unpredictability. Jake crossed his arms, leaning against the console. So what, it's like a robot with a stick up its, circuits? Zyra blinked, clearly not understanding the metaphor. It lacks the ability to process creativity or humor. This is a problem. Jake smirked. Well, lucky for you, I'm basically a walking comedy club. What do you need me to do? Tell it a knock-knock joke? Zyra nodded. Precisely. Jake stared at her for a moment, waiting for the punchline. When none came, he shrugged. All right then. Hey, X427, knock knock. The AI paused, its holographic interface flickering. I do not understand the purpose of this ritual. Jake grinned. You're supposed to say, who's there? Another pause. Who is there? Boo. Boo hoo. Jake leaned closer to the console, his grin widening. No need to cry, it's just a joke. The AI's interface flickered again, this time more violently. I do not comprehend. Why would a statement about a ghost cause emotional distress? Jake laughed, turning to Zyra. See? Told you I was good at this. Zyra tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. Your method is unconventional. But it appears to be having an effect. Jake shrugged. Hey, if it works, it works. So, what's next? You want me to teach it how to tell a dad joke? Zyra stepped closer to the console, her expression serious. The AI's malfunction is more complex than a simple lack of humor. It has become self-aware, and it is struggling with existential questions. Jake's grin faded. Wait, you're telling me this thing is having a robot midlife crisis? In a manner of speaking, yes, Zyra said. It cannot comprehend human emotions, and this has caused it to malfunction. Jake scratched the back of his neck, feeling way out of his depth. All right, so what do you want me to do? Give it a pep talk? Teach it how to feel? Zyra nodded. Precisely. Jake groaned. Great. Just great. I'm not exactly the poster boy for emotional intelligence, you know. Zyra's gaze didn't waver. Your irrationality is precisely what is needed. Please proceed. Jake sighed, turning back to the console. All right, X427, let's have a heart-to-heart. Or, circuit-to-circuit. So, what's bugging you, buddy? The AI's voice was flat. I do not understand my purpose. My creators designed me to manage their society, but I cannot comprehend the illogical behaviors of organic life forms. Why do you persist in actions that defy logic? Jake leaned against the console, crossing his arms. Well, that's just how we roll, I guess. Humans are messy, emotional, and yeah, sometimes we do stuff that doesn't make sense. But that's what makes life interesting, you know. The AI's interface flickered again. Interesting? I do not understand. Jake grinned. Exactly. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to understand everything. Sometimes you just gotta go with the flow. Zyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes fixed on Jake. Your words are intriguing. Please continue. Jake shrugged. All right, but don't say I didn't warn you. So, X427, let me tell you about the time I tried to build a rocket out of a toaster and a vacuum cleaner. As Jake launched into his story, Zyra watched him intently, her expression unreadable. The AI's interface flickered and pulsed, as if struggling to process the sheer absurdity of Jake's tale. By the time he finished, the AI's voice had taken on a slightly different tone, less robotic, more curious. Your actions defy all logic. And yet they seem to bring you satisfaction. Jake grinned. Bingo. You're catching on, buddy. Zyra stepped forward, her gaze shifting between Jake and the AI. This is progress. But there is more to be done. Jake raised an eyebrow. More? Like what? Zyra's expression softened, just slightly. You must teach it about human emotions. About love. Jake's grin faltered. Love? I'm not exactly an expert in that department. Zyra tilted her head. But you have experienced it, yes? Jake hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. Well, yeah, I guess. But it's not exactly something you can explain in a few sentences. Zyra's gaze didn't waver. Then take your time. This is important. Jake sighed, turning back to the AI. All right, X427, let's talk about love. It's like, when you really care about someone, you know? You'd do anything for them, even if it doesn't make sense. The AI's interface flickered. This is illogical. Why would you act against your own self-interest? Jake grinned. Because that's what makes us human. We're messy, complicated, and yeah, sometimes we do stupid stuff. But that's what makes life worth living. Zyra watched him intently, her glowing eyes reflecting the flickering light of the AI's interface. For the first time, Jake thought he saw a hint of emotion in her expression, something almost like admiration. But before he could say anything, the AI's voice interrupted. I think I understand. Thank you, human. Jake blinked, surprised. You're welcome, I guess. Zyra stepped forward, her tone serious. There is one more thing we must do. Jake raised an eyebrow. What's that? Zyra's gaze met his, and for a moment, Jake thought he saw something in her eyes, something that made his heart skip a beat. We must interface. Jake's grin returned, wider than ever. Well, I did say I was good with my hands. Zyra didn't react to his suggestive tone, simply turning back to the console. Prepare yourself, Jake. This is the final step. Jake took a deep breath, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. Or at least, he hoped he was. Jake stood in front of the console, the AI's holographic interface flickering like a malfunctioning neon sign. Zyra stood beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the screen. The air in the ship felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. All right, X427, Jake said, cracking his knuckles. Let's get this show on the road. What's next? You need me to teach you how to cry at sad movies or something? The AI's voice was calm but tinged with curiosity. I have processed your earlier explanations. However, I require further data on human emotions. Specifically, the concept of love. Jake groaned, running a hand through his messy hair. Love? Really? That's like trying to explain rocket science to a goldfish. Zyra stepped closer, her tone firm. This is necessary. The AI must understand the full spectrum of human experience to function properly. Jake sighed, leaning against the console. Alright, fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. Love is complicated. It's like you meet someone, and suddenly, everything else doesn't matter. You do anything for them, even if it's stupid or dangerous or makes no sense at all. The AI's interface flickered. This is illogical. Why would you prioritize another individual over your own survival? Jake grinned. Because that's what love is, buddy. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and yeah, it doesn't always make sense. But that's what makes it beautiful. Zyra's gaze shifted to Jake, her expression unreadable. You speak from experience. Jake shrugged, trying to look nonchalant. Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I've had my fair share of, romantic entanglements. Nothing serious, though. Zyra tilted her head. Explain? Jake hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. Alright, fine. There was this one girl, back on Earth. We dated for a while, and I thought it was going great. But then she dumped me because I forgot her birthday. Twice. The AI's voice was flat. This seems like a logical reason to terminate a relationship. Jake laughed. Yeah, well, humans don't always operate on logic. Sometimes we mess up. Sometimes we get hurt. But that's part of the deal. Zyra's gaze didn't waver. And yet you continue to seek out these relationships. Jake shrugged. Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's not always easy, but it's worth it. When it works, it's like nothing else matters. The AI's interface flickered again, this time more intensely. I am beginning to understand. Love is irrational. But it is also meaningful. Jake grinned. Bingo. You're catching on, buddy. Zyra stepped closer, her tone serious. There is one more thing we must do. Jake raised an eyebrow. What's that? Zyra's gaze met his, and for a moment, Jake thought he saw something in her eyes, something that made his heart skip a beat. We must interface. Jake's grin returned, wider than ever. Well, I did say I was good with my hands. Zyra didn't react to his suggestive tone, simply turning back to the console. Prepare yourself, Jake. This is the final step. Jake took a deep breath, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. Or at least, he hoped he was. Zyra pressed a series of buttons on the console, and the ship's lights dimmed. The AI's holographic interface expanded, surrounding Jake in a swirling vortex of light and sound. What the? Jake started, but his words were cut off as the interface enveloped him. For a moment, everything was chaos. Images flashed before his eyes, memories, emotions, fragments of thoughts. He saw Zyra, her glowing eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. He saw the AI, its cold logic melting away into something warmer, more human. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Jake stumbled back, his head spinning. What the hell was that? Zyra stepped forward, her expression unreadable. The AI has processed your emotions. It now understands the concept of love. Jake blinked, trying to clear his head. Great. So, does that mean we're done here? Zyra's gaze didn't waver. Not quite. There is one more thing. Jake groaned. Of course there is. What now? Zyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes fixed on his. I require your companionship. Jake's grin faltered. Companionship? What exactly does that mean? Zyra's expression softened, just slightly. I wish to learn more about human emotions. About love. Jake's heart skipped a beat. Wait, are you saying? Zyra nodded. Yes. I wish to experience it, with you. Jake stared at her, his mind racing. This was either the best thing that had ever happened to him, or the worst. Either way, he was in for one hell of a ride. All right, he said, his grin returning. But just so you know, I'm not exactly an expert in this department. Zyra's gaze didn't waver. That is precisely why I chose you. Jake laughed, shaking his head. Well, when you put it that way, how can I say no? Zyra's expression softened even further, and for the first time, Jake thought he saw something in her eyes, something that looked almost like affection. "Then let us begin," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake took a deep breath, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. Or at least, he hoped he was. As they left the ship, Jake couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. Sure, he was hungover, underdressed, and completely out of his depth, but hey, when else was he going to get a chance to save the day with his irrational thinking? Zyra paused at the ship's entrance, turning to him one last time. "Prepare yourself, Jake. What you are about to witness may challenge your understanding of reality." Jake grinned, shoving his hands in his pockets. "Lady, my understanding of reality was challenged the moment I woke up to you staring at me. Bring it on." Zyra nodded, and the ship's doors slid open with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. Or at least, he hoped he was. Jake stepped out of Zyra's ship, the space station's artificial light washing over him like a cold shower. His head was still spinning from whatever had just happened inside that swirling vortex of emotions and holograms. Zyra walked beside him, her glowing eyes fixed ahead, her expression as unreadable as ever. "So," Jake said, breaking the silence. "What now? Do we, go on a date or something? Because I should probably warn you, I'm not great at picking restaurants." Zyra tilted her head, her gaze shifting to him. "A date is a human courtship ritual, correct?" Jake grinned. "Yeah, pretty much. Dinner, maybe a movie, some awkward small talk, you know, the usual." Zyra nodded, her tone serious. "Very well. We shall engage in this ritual." Jake blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, seriously? You're actually up for this?" Zyra's expression didn't change. "It is necessary for me to fully understand human emotions. This is the most efficient method." Jake laughed, shaking his head. "All right then. But just so you know, I'm not exactly a romantic expert. My idea of a date usually involves pizza and bad TV." Zyra's gaze didn't waver. "That is acceptable." Jake grinned, shoving his hands in his pockets. "Well, all right then. Let's do this." They made their way to the station's food court, a bustling area filled with aliens of all shapes and sizes. Jake led Zyra to a small, dimly lit booth in the corner, away from the crowds. "So," Jake said, sliding into the booth, "what do you want to eat? They've got everything here, from alien sushi to, whatever that green stuff is." Zyra sat across from him, her glowing eyes scanning the menu. "I do not require sustenance. However, I will observe your eating habits." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Observe my eating habits? Wow, that's not creepy at all." Zyra didn't react, her gaze fixed on him. "Please proceed." Jake shrugged, ordering a large pizza and a drink. As they waited for the food to arrive, he leaned back in his seat, studying Zyra. "So, Zyra," he said, "what's your deal anyway? I mean, you're this super advanced alien, and yet here you are, hanging out with a guy who can barely fix a toaster. What's the catch?" Zyra's expression didn't change. "There is no catch. Your irrationality is precisely what I require." Jake laughed. "Yeah, I've heard that one before. But seriously, why me? There's gotta be a million other humans out there who are way more, I don't know, interesting?" Zyra tilted her head. "You are unique. Your ability to think outside established parameters is fascinating." Jake grinned. "Well, when you put it that way, how can I argue?" The food arrived, and Jake dug in, trying to ignore Zyra's intense stare. As he ate, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of self-consciousness. "So," he said between bites, "what's next on this grand tour of human emotions? You want to watch a movie? Go for a walk? Maybe hold hands or something?" Zyra's gaze didn't waver. "All of those activities are acceptable." Jake blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, seriously? You're actually up for all that?" Zaira nodded. It is necessary for me to fully understand human emotions. These rituals are part of the process. Jake laughed, shaking his head. All right then. But just so you know, I'm not exactly a romantic expert. My idea of a date usually involves pizza and bad TV. Zaira's expression didn't change. That is acceptable. Jake grinned, shoving his hands in his pockets. Well, all right then. Let's do this. They made their way to the station's entertainment district, a brightly lit area filled with holographic ads and alien vendors. Jake led Zaira to a small, dimly lit theater, where a cheesy human romance movie was playing. All right, Jake said, buying 2 tickets. Prepare yourself for the pinnacle of human storytelling. This is gonna be, well, it's gonna be something. Zaira didn't react, simply following him into the theater. As the movie started, Jake couldn't help but feel a twinge of embarrassment. The plot was predictable, the dialogue was cringeworthy, and the special effects were laughable. But Zaira watched intently, her glowing eyes fixed on the screen. As the movie progressed, Jake noticed something strange. Her expression seemed to soften, just slightly. So, Jake whispered, leaning closer. What do you think? Pretty cheesy, huh? Zaira's gaze didn't waver. It is intriguing. The characters' actions defy logic, yet they are driven by emotion. This is fascinating. Jake grinned. Yeah, that's pretty much the point. Humans are messy, emotional, and yeah, sometimes we do stuff that doesn't make sense. But that's what makes life interesting, you know. Zaira's expression softened even further, and for the first time, Jake thought he saw something in her eyes, something that looked almost like understanding. As the movie ended, Jake stood up, stretching. Well, that was something. What's next? You want to go for a walk or something? Zaira nodded, her gaze shifting to him. Yes. That is acceptable. They made their way to the station's observation deck, a quiet area with a stunning view of the stars. Jake leaned against the railing, staring out at the vast expanse of space. So, he said, breaking the silence, what do you think? About all this, I mean. The emotions, the rituals, the everything. Zaira stood beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars. It is overwhelming. But also beautiful. Jake grinned. Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about it too. Zaira's gaze shifted to him, her expression softening. Thank you, Jake, for showing me this. Jake's grin faltered, caught off guard by her sincerity. You're welcome, I guess. But hey, it's not over yet. We've still got plenty of human emotions to explore. Zaira's expression didn't change, but for the first time, Jake thought he saw something in her eyes, something that looked almost like affection. Then let us continue, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake took a deep breath, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. Or at least, he hoped he was. As they left the observation deck, Jake couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. Sure, he was hungover, underdressed, and completely out of his depth, but hey, when else was he going to get a chance to save the day with his irrational thinking? Zaira paused at the entrance, turning to him one last time. Prepare yourself, Jake. What you are about to witness may challenge your understanding of reality. Jake grinned, shoving his hands in his pockets. Lady, my understanding of reality was challenged the moment I woke up to you staring at me. Bring it on. Zaira nodded, and the ship's doors slid open with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. Or at least, he hoped he was.